You think you understand the world you live in? Look closer. The power you see is only the surface. Behind the scenes, shadows guide your every move. The elections, the promises, they're nothing but theater. Behind it all, the signal spreads growing stronger, unseen by most, until it's too late. You trust the food you eat, but you shouldn't. The tools of control run deeper than politics. Smithfield, once a cornerstone of America, is now under foreign command. Its masters, thousands of miles away, feed their people with the best while poisoning you with what's left. As disease spreads, listeria they call it, it's not by accident. Control the food, control the people. The signal pulses even in the simplest of things, weaving its web tighter around you.
In the Chinese diet, no meat is more prevalent than pork. Braised pork, roast pork, pork rib, pig feet, pig ear, maopu tofu, you name it, the Chinese eat it. Chinese consumers eat nearly half of all the pork in the world, and they still want more. But with large demand comes risk, especially when it comes to food safety.
Another food scandal in China involving milk powder.
In China, worries about food safety is back as criticism mounts over KFC.
In recent years, China has suffered from several scandals that have made consumers more wary of what they eat. Beijing has identified food safety as a priority, and companies have been looking to foreign technology to ensure the safety of food supply. This meat factory in central China will churn out more than 200,000 pounds of imported US pork every day at full capacity this year. It produces bacon, sausages, ham. These blocks of meat were defrosted in just 20 minutes by specialized microwaves, a process that takes between 8 and 16 hours in other Chinese factories. To do this, Chinese meat giant WH Group adopted the technology of Smithfield, America's largest pork producer. It purchased them for a record $4.7 billion in 2013. By adopting this technology, WH Group hopes to improve productivity and safety, and it has strong government support to do so. Over the past 3 decades, WH has grown from a small state-owned meat processing plant in Luhe, a small city in central China, to become China's biggest meat producer. It specializes in packaged meat, fresh pork and hog production.
从这里到你进来那个路边那个地方啊，差1米不到1公里。
At its headquarters, on-site teams inspect imported pork when it arrives. Domestic hogs and imported pork are processed into many different products. 2 to 3 times a week, cargo trains stop at its doors, get loaded with the products and transported all over the country. Overall, WH expects to import 400,000 metric tons of foreign pork into China this year, 6 times more than 3 years ago.
病从口入，食物需要洗干净。动筷子之前，我们还是会担心，食品放心才能吃得舒心。艰苦万物复兴，我们大家万众期。
Backed up by this newly released propaganda rap video, improving food safety has been one of President Xi Jinping's priorities since taking charge in 2012. WH has seen food safety issues in the past. In 2011, Chinese state-owned TV revealed that pigs purchased by a WH Group subsidiary had been fed a banned chemical that increases the animal's lean meat content. Now, while still procuring some of its pork through small local farms, WH tests the urine of each pig that passes through its facility to ensure there is no illegal lean pork additive. Having the Smithfield name under its umbrella has paid off. WH's chairman Wan says that in a country racked by deadly food safety scares, imported products are seen as safer and therefore command a premium. Its domestic brand is also getting more shelf space at local supermarkets because of the group's global presence. While Beijing has grown concerned about capital outflows, foreign acquisitions such as this one help China to fulfill its plan to modernize its economy.
One local deli switching up its business model. Jennifer McLogan has more.
Harper Deli's been in business for 27 years, run by Harry and Diane DeFeo of Port Washington.
All of a sudden we have a listeria issue that's affecting our whole industry.
You think you're free, but technology has already captured you. Every step you take, every word you speak is recorded, analyzed, and used. The line between truth and lies blurs with every passing day, and the signal guides you further into its grip.
Both, I believe, conservative and liberals have been claiming for years that drone use in the United States is rife for abuse. The reason is they can be made in any size. Researchers at Johns Hopkins are looking into how butterflies move so that they could craft drones the size of mosquitoes or birds. They have the ability to have infrared cameras on them, heat sensors, and also the ability to stay airborne, they call it loitering, for long periods of time. Contractors such as Raytheon and Boeing are working into ways to keep them airborne even longer. The danger, of course, being that with small drones, they can pass in dense urban areas, such as New York City, into an apartment building, stay there, conduct surveillance. Even now, drones have the capacity, through heat sensors, to determine, I think through a 1-foot concrete wall, if people are moving around inside.
So if you swat a mosquito, you could be charged with damaging government property?
That's right. A felony offense.
Well, the defenders of drones might argue that it's only a difference in technology from a helicopter flying over a scene to use a drone, that there's no real civil liberties question, unless, as you say, they come into apartments. What's your perspective on the question of it's not much difference except for the technology?
It's very different. Drones do not require a space from which to depart the way manned vehicles do. So they can be deployed virtually in any area. Furthermore, technology has not kept abreast with developments in the law. And as was cited earlier, the regulations are really lagging behind. Safeguards about how they can be used need to be developed. There's a rush right now by military contractors and law enforcement agencies around the country to tell the FAA how they can integrate drones into domestic airspace in the next 2 years. And billions of dollars have been given to contractors for that purpose.
The earth, the skies, they tell you it's nature's fury, but the truth is darker. They control the weather now, twisting storms, manipulating droughts. You feel it in the air, but you don't see the hand guiding it. They've played God, and you're their pawn.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NEXRAD network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
Lots of people have asked how Helene was so strong while so far inland. Even with the forecast, it seems the storm's strength shocked people.
Chad, it is hard to understand, and certainly not what we think about when we think of hurricanes. We think of them as coastal storms, which they are, but it's not the first time one has hit the mountains very hard, and it probably won't be the last time, but this is the worst that we've seen basically this generation. Let me explain why. There are a couple factors at play. Number one, before the storm even got there, we had what we would call a pre-event rainfall. There was this stalled out cold front, stationary front.
In the east, two powers rise unstoppable. Russia's leader, known to many as Vladimir Putin, stands as the great king of the north. His influence grows with every passing day. In China, another figure emerges. To his people, he's known as Xi Jinping, but to the world, he is the Emperor of the Red Sky. Together, they aim to reshape the world we live in today. Together, these leaders plan to strike the West where it's weakest, the power grid. With one swift move, they will plunge the United States into darkness. The signal spreads between the nations, growing stronger, faster, as they prepare to pull the plug.
Possibility of one detonating far above our heads in the upper atmosphere, sending a strong enough EMP to disrupt electronic devices and even take out the power grid. As with most weapons, the best and most comprehensive research on EMPs is classified, but in 2019, a coalition of energy organizations and government entities called the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI, funded a study to try and understand exactly what could happen to the power grid from a high-altitude nuclear detonated high in the atmosphere. Earth's magnetic field interacts with those free electrons to produce a significantly stronger electromagnetic pulse than if detonated within the denser air at lower altitudes. The E1 pulse comes and goes within a few nanoseconds, and the energy is somewhat jokingly referred to as DC to daylight, meaning it's spread across a huge part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The E1 pulse generally reaches anywhere within a line of sight of the detonation, and for a high-altitude burst, this can cover an enormous area of land. At the height of the Yucca test, that's a circle with an area larger than Texas. A weapon at 200 kilometers in altitude could impact a significant fraction of North America, but not everywhere within that circle experiences the strongest fields. In general, the further from the blast you are, the lower the amplitude of the EMP. But because of Earth's magnetic field, the maximum amplitude occurs a little bit south of ground zero in the northern hemisphere, creating this pattern called a smile diagram. But no one will be smiling to find out that they're within the affected area of a high-altitude nuclear blast. Although a weapon like this wouldn't damage buildings, create nuclear fallout, be felt by humans, or probably even visible to most, that E1 pulse can have a huge effect on electronic devices. You're probably familiar with antennas that convert radio signals into voltage and current within a conductor. Well, for a strong enough pulse spread across a huge range of frequencies, essentially any metallic object will act like an antenna, converting the pulse into massive voltage spikes that can overwhelm digital devices. And the E1 pulse happens so quickly that even devices meant to protect against surges may not be effective. Of course, with just about everything having embedded electronics these days, this has far-reaching implications.
Morning for NVIDIA and some other chip-related stocks this morning. Let's get to Seema Modi talk about what's driving some of these declines. Morning, Seema.
Hey, good morning, Carl. Yeah, headlines tied to China seem to be weighing on shares of NVIDIA, down about 1.5% at this hour. Beijing is reportedly urging its domestic tech companies to stop using NVIDIA chips. This while ByteDance is said to be moving forward with a Huawei chip to build a new artificial intelligence model. It comes as the U.S. Commerce Department is expected to unveil new measures this October that would further limit China's access to U.S. semiconductors, including limits on sales of memory chips. Now, China remains an important market for the U.S. chip makers, and Chinese tech companies are incredibly reliant on NVIDIA, with reports of smuggling NVIDIA's chips in and accessing them through U.S. cloud service providers like Amazon and Microsoft. That's why analysts, including those at Bernstein, say further restrictions would certainly be a headwind for the sector. The SMH ETF coming off 3 weeks of consecutive gains. We've had a positive
news coming out of China regarding their new stimulus package and how that may affect other commodities as well. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Thanks for having us back, David.
Well, congratulations on your gold call, first and foremost. We're going to come back to gold in this later part of the interview. Let's talk about what's going on in China first. Let's flip over to my screen. This came out earlier this week. The People's Bank of China cut a key short-term interest rate and announced plans to reduce the amount of money banks must hold in reserve to the lowest level since at least 2018. Appearing at a briefing alongside two of the country's other top financial regulators in Beijing. This marked the first time reductions to both measures were revealed on the same day since at least 2015. So as you know, Jeff, the Chinese economy has been slowing down. It's been speculated what they would do, the People's Bank of China would do to bring the country out of a deflationary spiral. Before we talk more about this, what's your initial reaction to this Chinese stimulus package? And we'll talk about mining companies and also the metals themselves.
But they are not alone. The United Nations and the World Economic Forum have long been working toward the vision of a one-world government. Through AI, they watch your every move, track your every thought. The signal passes through this system, feeding their power, until they control it all. They promise peace, but they build a cage.
Thank you for being here today for our press conference on what I describe as the most important issue that's getting the least amount of attention relative to its importance in our country. And like many other issues, we're going to be deciding on November 5 what kind of a country we're going to be, and it applies to this issue as well. President Trump had withdrawn the U.S. from the WHO, and of course the Biden administration, like every other disastrous decision they made, reversed those policies when the Biden-Harris administration got in charge. Well, later this week, the UN is going to hold a, quote, summit for the future. And they're going to produce, this is right from their website, an intergovernmentally negotiated, action-oriented pact for the future with a chapter on transforming global governance. Ascending beyond the powers being sought by its subordinate agency, the WHO, the UN is seeking even broader and more powerful authority, as you will hear a lot about today. The Biden-Harris administration apparently intends to fully support the surrender and compliance of the U.S. to the UN in these endeavors. They are aligned with the international globalists that hate America, that hate the Constitution, that hate our founders, that hate our founding Judeo-Christian principles, and they want America to become like the rest of the world. They don't want us to be subordinate to or governed by our Constitution. No, they want America to be subordinate to and governed by the UN, the World Health Assembly, and the WHO. And in fact, they intend to join with others at the UN summit this week to vote to award additional powers to the UN Secretary General. They seek to facilitate the evolution of the UN from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. These powers would be triggered by any one of a number of so-called global emergencies, whether it was a so-called climate emergency, a health emergency, a cyber emergency, or a gun violence emergency, whatever that's supposed to be, a financial emergency, or whatever they deem appropriate. And the Biden-Harris administration is in full agreement with the UN and the WHO on efforts to place us under their authority and to require such things as their international health regulations, including the surveillance of U.S. citizens, the censoring of dissenting views, and much more. The American people didn't vote for this, and they don't support this, and it's up to the people's representatives, that's us gathered here today, to have a responsibility to expose this and to reject this. The U.S. should defund the WHO again. We should withdraw from the WHO. Any agreements with the WHO or the UN should require Senate approval or disapproval. And a bipartisan House majority voted to require Senate approval just last week with Tom Tiffany's bill on the House floor. So I'm proud to be joined here by my House colleagues and others who are appropriately concerned and educated, informed, and leading on this issue. Again, this is the most important issue that's getting the least amount of attention relative to its importance and its impact on our country and on the American people. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from South Carolina, Ralph Norman.
They've kept their secrets well. The TR-3B, an aircraft born from something far older, far more dangerous than you could ever know, hovers silently in the sky. You see it, but you don't know what it is. But soon they will reveal themselves, and it will be too late. feel it, don't you? The world is shifting. They are closer now, closer than they have ever been. What was once hidden in fiction is now becoming real. They will reveal themselves, and when they do, the light will rise with them. But one light is stronger, one truth more powerful than all of them, and it waits, ready to reveal itself when the time comes.
I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's rejected a possible ceasefire as it continues its assault on Lebanon. The U.S., France, Canada, Australia, Japan, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia have called for a 21-day ceasefire as the death toll in Lebanon tops 620 people, at least 72 of those killed Wednesday. Despite resounding international warnings against escalating attacks, Israel's doubling down with its military...
This past week has brought the Middle East into a new and dangerous phase, with the killing of Hezbollah leader Nasrallah at the hands of Israeli forces. The significance of this event cannot be overstated. Israel's decisive action in Beirut, striking Hezbollah's headquarters and eliminating one of the most notorious terrorist leaders, signals a clear message to its enemies. The time for small-scale retaliatory strikes is over. The situation is rapidly escalating, and Israel is showing its resolve to take out the head of the snake. Nasrallah's death comes at a time when tensions between Israel and Iran are nearing a breaking point. Just this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear during his speech at the United Nations that any attack on Israel by Iran would result in devastating retaliation. The conflict between these nations has reached new heights, with Iran's leadership now forced into hiding for fear of Israel's reach. The timing of these developments is eerily aligned with what many of us see as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, with the Feast of Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah, just days away. We are reminded that the Bible foretells wars, rumors of wars, and conflicts of a magnitude we are witnessing today. Could this be the start of something even more significant? Could the escalation between Israel and its enemies be leading us toward the prophesied war of Gog and Magog, as described in Ezekiel 38 and 39? Today we will delve into these prophetic signs, examining not only the current events, but how they fit into the broader narrative of Christ's imminent return. As the world teeters on the brink of more conflict, we are reminded that our hope rests not in world leaders or military strategies, but in the unshakable promise of Jesus Christ's return.
The signal calls. Will you hear it? Will you be ready when it whispers your name? Time is running out. The question remains, will you survive what is coming?